My name is Daniel. Before all this, I was supposed to be an engineer. I used to believe the world could be fixed if you just learned how it worked. Machines had patterns, blueprints made sense. If something broke, you could take it apart and rebuild it. That kind of certainty was comfort. Then life got expensive. My dad got sick, months in and out of hospitals, slow recoveries that never really ended. My mom worked until her hands swelled, and I picked up jobs between classes. By the time he came home, I was too far behind. Loans, bills, interest rates, they didn't care about love or effort. So I left school and started paying instead of learning. That's how I ended up here, the warehouse. It used to be one of Amazon's older fulfillment centers, now half abandoned, converted into what they call a residential logistics facility. It's the kind of place built for efficiency, not comfort, where the lights hum instead of shine, and the air smells faintly of dust and machine oil. They offer a deal: live on site, work 20-hour shifts, no rent, no food costs. It's not a bad bargain if you've got nowhere else to go. I live in a small unit above the warehouse floor, a cot, a sink, a hot plate. When I close my eyes, I still hear the conveyors running below. Sometimes I imagine they keep going even when power cuts, like the whole place moves on its own rhythm, too stubborn to stop. It's quiet most nights. I don't mind quiet. The thing is, quiet doesn't mean peace here. It just means you can hear what moves when it shouldn't. I've been here 8 months. Long enough to learn the warehouse's moods, the way the floor trembles when the forklifts run, how the ceiling creaks when the wind hits the panels just right. Long enough to notice when something new joins the noise. My only real company is a cat named Milo. At least I think he's a cat. The first night I met him, he looked like a pile of trash, curled under my cot, half covered in packing paper, one eye gleaming out of the dark. When I tried to reach for him, he growled like I'd insulted him, then turned away and went back to sleep. No collar, no tags, just grease on his fur and a scar where his eye should have been. When I tried to carry him outside the next morning, he bit through my glove and refused to move. So I gave up. He stayed. I called him Milo. He never reacted, but he didn't leave either. Milo's not like other cats. He disappears for hours and returns smelling of strange places. Burnt rubber, metal filings, sometimes vinegar. Once he came back warm to the touch, as if he'd been near a running engine. I don't ask questions. He doesn't like the scanner's beeps or the forklift's alarms. But when I'm sitting still, he curls up by my boot like a tired coworker. It's nice in a way. Even a ghost job feels less empty when something alive, or almost alive, keeps you company. The warehouse itself is enormous, stretching beyond sight lines. The lights thin out the farther you go until the last aisles blur into shadow. That's where the forgotten inventory lives. Busted appliances, canceled orders, boxes with labels too faded to read. They call it deep storage, but really it's just where things go to be forgotten. I've noticed that the forgotten things never stop arriving. Every few days, a truck backs into the loading bay, drops off pallets of unsorted stock, and leaves without a word. No one signs for them. No one checks manifests. The boxes pile up like sediment, layers of time and neglect pressed together. Some are so old the tape has melted. That's where I work. Receiving. Sorting the ghosts of commerce. It's cold down there. My boots squeak against the concrete, and the air always smells faintly wet like rust and coolant. When I breathe too long, my throat tastes metallic. The machines hum softly, endlessly, as if dreaming. I used to think the hum was mechanical. Now I'm not so sure. When I arrived, a man in a yellow vest trained me for 3 days. He barely spoke. Just showed me how to clock in, avoid the lifts, and keep my head down. On the 4th day, he was gone. The office said he'd quit, transferred to Phoenix. They offered me his quarters. I accepted. His locker still held his things. Folded uniforms, gum, a toothbrush. Everything neat, like he was packed to leave but never made it out the door. Inside one pocket I found a note. No name, no date. Just 3 words in fading blue ink. Don't feed it. At the time I laughed. I thought it was a joke left for the next night worker, part of the folklore every dead-end job collects. But I kept the note. It sits in my locker even now, edges curled, ink nearly gone. That same night, Milo started riding on my shoulder. He leapt up when I bent to tie my boots, claws catching my shirt, and refused to get down. From then on, it became routine. Him perched behind my neck like a scarf, quiet and watchful. I got used to it. Until we passed aisle 47. I hadn't noticed it before. It's deeper than the others, near the rear zone by deep storage. The shelves there lean slightly inward, like the building's bones are tired. Half the lights flicker, the other half never turn off. Maintenance says it's wiring. They've never fixed it. As we walked past, Milo tensed. His tail flicked once, slow. His one eye followed something I couldn't see. It was only 9:30 p.m., hours before the shift rule that said, "Do not acknowledge movement in aisle 47 after 2 a.m." Still, I didn't linger. That night, I reread the laminated rule sheet taped inside my locker. 12 rules. The first few about safety harnesses and chemical spills. Then the strange ones. Do not acknowledge movement in aisle 47 after 2 a.m. If the red light above the freezer turns green, leave immediately. Do not respond to pages ending in 0. And the last one that made my throat go dry. If something knocks, do not knock back. I thought about the note again. Don't feed it. I didn't know what it was, but I was beginning to think this place did. I realized something was wrong the night the hum changed pitch. The conveyors always breathed the same way, steady, mid-tone, a factory lullaby. But near 3 in the morning, the note slid lower, as if the belts were carrying something heavier than they should, something that made the rollers protest from deep in their bearings. I was restocking returns on the south end where the ceiling panels spiderweb with old cracks and the light stutters every few seconds. Dust lifts with each flicker and hangs there, a pale fog. Milo was on my shoulder, warm and patient, his claws finding the soft spots in my uniform by memory. I had tied a new black patch over his scar that evening, a little crescent of cloth I cut from an old glove. He didn't fight me when I tied it. He just blinked once, slow, like he was humoring me. I dropped a crate of dead tablets onto a cart and scanned the label. The scanner chirped. The noise rolled down the aisle and died against steel. Then something answered with a different kind of sound. A dragging sound. Weight pulled over concrete, not hard and scraping, but soft, like a sack that shouldn't slosh did. I stepped to the end of the aisle and leaned out. At first, I thought it was a man in a yellow vest moving between the rows. We still have a few people on nights, but you learn their outlines without meaning to, the way you learn a friend's walk across a crowded street. This shape didn't match. The shoulders were wrong, too broad and sagging as if hung on a frame that had settled unevenly. The arms swung low past what should have been the pockets. The head tilted forward at a degree that made my own neck ache in sympathy. The lights above that row blinked twice. In the half-dark, the shape kept moving, pulling something behind it that left a darker wake on the concrete. The thick sound of it dragged time with it. "Hey," I said before my brain caught up. "You good over there?" It froze. The hum of the belt seemed to retreat, like a breath drawn and held. The shape turned, not all at once, but in parts. First the head, then the chest, then the hips, like it had to remember the order. That's when the smell found me. Sharp and bright, like copper kept in a warm fist. Under it, the slick note of old oil, and under that, the sweet damp of meat left too long in air that doesn't move. It hit the back of my tongue and made water gather beneath it. Milo made a sound I'd never heard from him, small and torn, and launched off my shoulder, vanishing down the opposite corridor without a claw's apology. I didn't move. Maybe I couldn't. The figure stood too still, like stillness was its practiced trick. The belt clicked somewhere behind me, a simple mechanical truth asserting itself, and when I blinked, the shape slipped back into the dark seam between racks and was gone. I stood with my hand on the cart handle until the skin of my palm printed the ridges, breathing through my mouth, trying to filter the taste of copper and rot into something neutral. When I could make my legs answer again, I pushed the cart to receiving and pretended I had a reason to be there. Later, on break, I asked one of the other night workers if anything weird lived on the south end. He didn't look up from his noodles. The fluorescent light put a yellow ring in his eyes. You get sounds, he said. Building settles, old belts chatter. If you're smart, you don't go sightseeing after midnight. That's when people get hurt because they're hunting shadows. He slurped, then added, Don't go wandering off shift. It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't help. I went back to work because that's what the rule sheet wants you to do. Keep the function uninterrupted. Move the box, scan, lift, repeat. I tried to put the shape in the bin of things you label and shelf. Forklift, bad light, tired brain. The comfort of categorizing worked for a handful of minutes at a time before the smell returned like a memory. On quieter nights, I read. If you look long enough, the warehouse gives back the things people stuffed into returns when they didn't want to deal with them anymore. Books disappear into bigger boxes and are forgotten. I'd found a dog-eared Frankenstein with coffee dried on the cover and the first 40 pages of 20,000 Leagues torn loose and folded in a manila envelope. I keep them in a stack by my cot. Words remind me there are systems that aren't machines, monsters that are names for other problems. I thought about my dad and the stories he told about red things. I thought about the laminated rules and the way the strange ones sat beside the practical, as if both were equally true. Do not acknowledge movement in aisle 47 after 2 a.m. Do not touch exposed wires. If the red light above the freezer turns green, leave immediately. Report spills. If something knocks, do not knock back. That last one tapped at me from the inside. The next time I saw the shape, I had Milo with me again. He rode my shoulders like ballast. We were logging returns in the H rows, the ones with bulk goods. The air is cooler there, colder metal, more open floor so the breeze from the bay doors can find you and crawl under your shirt. My scanner had stopped picking up barcodes. I was keying numbers by hand to keep my rhythm. I felt him stiffen before I saw anything. His muscles bunched under my collar. The patch over his scar was warm where it pressed against my neck. Across the gap between racks, a head leaned into the aisle. It wasn't a peek. It was a tilt, like curiosity pushed it too far. The face didn't resolve at first. Then the light slid down and caught it, and I thought of a mask stretched wrong over a form it wasn't made to fit. The features misaligned by a few degrees in ways your eye knows before your brain agrees. Where eyes should have anchored the face, there were darker places, glossy in the light like the centers of certain animals stare at night. I did not speak. My mouth had gone cotton dry. Milo growled. It rolled up from him like a motor starting. He dropped to the floor and ran. By the time my lungs remembered to move, the head was gone from the aisle, and with it the prickling pressure on my skin. That was the night I gave it a name. Not because I believed a name could keep a thing in its place, but because calling it nothing felt worse. I called it Bill. The word sat in my mouth with a simple weight, the kind of name you can say under your breath without drawing attention. Bill turned a column of dark into something I could put on a shelf in my mind. Maybe that is the first wrong thing I did. Days bleed together here, even when you count them. The chart on my wall fills and erases in pencil, debts crossing out as I cross off shifts. The office sent a message about new inventory flows, new algorithmic efficiencies that will maximize legacy asset value. I flagged 3 pallets of out-of-date toys for deep storage and pushed them down into the far aisles where the lights thin. That's where I found the crate. H7 is bulk, but things slip. Someone had jammed a small wooden box behind a row of microwaves like a child hiding a forbidden thing. It had no label. That's already against the rules, so I hauled it forward to tag it. The wood was damp against my palms, cold seeped into my skin. When I pried the lid, the smell met me first. Copper heat and something sweet that rides just behind blood when it's fresh. Inside was a hand, not a person's. The fingers were narrow and delicate, the palm padded, the little curled nails as neat as seeds. It was cleanly removed at the wrist. It wasn't frozen. It wasn't old. It was warm. I closed the lid, sealed it with the tape, I keep looped on my belt, and keyed in the report code for biohazard waste with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. The system accepted the form and gave me a disposal ticket. I put the crate on the quarantine cart and pushed it to the corner under the camera that doesn't blink. On my way back to the floor, I checked the inventory log to see where the crate had come from so I could write it up right. There was no origin, no scan, no route. According to the system, the box never existed. I told myself someone was playing a joke that had nothing to do with me. An old specimen from a training exercise, a prank, an initiation. I told myself the system drops things sometimes. Anyone who's worked here knows the database ghosts. That was easier to say before I saw the wet track on the concrete leading away from the corner where the quarantine cart sits, as if something had been dragged, slow and heavy, toward the aisle that doesn't get light in the mornings. I thought about the note in my locker. Don't feed it. That night, sleep slipped past me. The mezzanine hums differently than the floor. The sound comes up through your spine when you're on the cot. I lay on my back and watched shadows climb the wall where the safety light paints the railing. Milo stretched on my chest with his paws tucked, making himself heavy to pin me down. Every time my mind reached toward the shape of the thing between the racks, he kneaded once and reminded me to breathe. By morning, the disposal ticket showed as resolved. The box was gone. The log had trimmed itself short, as if a sentence had been erased mid-word. I checked the camera feed for the quarantine corner. The file was there. It opened to gray static. Timestamps burned along the bottom in obedient numbers, counting a motionless scene. I told no one. Sometimes keeping a thing unspoken makes it smaller. Sometimes it just keeps it close. A week later, the order came down. Retrieve unit number 84A, sub-level storage. Urgent. No details, no sign-off. Just a location that shouldn't have unlocked for my badge, and a time that pushed me down the stairs before the part of my brain that knows better could argue. If you want to know what Bill eats, you start by going where the air smells old. The first step down into sub-level storage sounded hollow, as if the stairwell itself didn't connect cleanly to the rest of the building. The echo came back, delayed, muffled, like it had to fight through water. I shined my flashlight down the shaft. Gray concrete walls lined with peeling paint and fluorescent tubes that hadn't glowed in years. A single metal handrail followed the curve, slick with condensation. I hesitated at the top, keycard still warm in my hand. The door had opened without complaint. No second authorization, no warning chime. It shouldn't have. My clearance didn't cover basements. Still, the order had an urgent flag. That word means something here. If you ignore an urgent tag, the system logs a violation, and 3 of those mean termination. And here, termination feels literal. So I went down. Each flight of stairs dropped me into air that felt older, colder, wetter. The smell shifted from machine oil to rust, and then to something that reminded me of seawater left in a bucket for too long. When my flashlight hit the floor, dust danced like it had been waiting. Sub-level storage looked like a museum built by machines that never understood why people built museums. Crates and equipment filled the aisles in strange arrangements, stacked, buried, fused by time. Most of the labels were handwritten on cardboard tags gone soft around the edges. Others had no markings at all, just the faint memory of stickers that had peeled away years ago. I followed the map on my tablet, 84A. The signal pulsed weakly, a blue dot drifting on a schematic so outdated it still listed Employee Vending Hub, where the cafeteria used to be. I passed what looked like broken vending machines, their glass fronts spidered with impact lines, their contents fossilized behind dust. The air was colder the deeper I went. My breath came out in a thin cloud. Somewhere above, I could hear the warehouse humming, but down here it was muted, like a dream you forget halfway through. Then I smelled it, copper and rot, faint but distinct. I froze. My flashlight beam cut across the next aisle, and there he was. Bill. Standing in front of shelf 84, same crooked shape, the slouch that made his shadow fall wrong. But this time, He was moving, slow chewing motions, deliberate, like he was learning how jaws work. Something wet gleamed at his feet, a dark pool spreading from whatever he was holding. I thought it might be a mop, or maybe a length of tubing, until I saw the shape of the fingers and the bend of a wrist. Not tubing, not a mop. Something that used to be alive. My stomach flipped so fast I nearly dropped the light. I backed into a rack of scrap parts, the sound sharp enough to make him pause. His head tilted up. The light hit his face, and I understood why I shouldn't have. It wasn't a face so much as a surface. Skin stretched too tight in some places and too loose in others. The mouth was wrong, too wide, edges thin as paper, and the teeth behind it looked like they'd been hammered in without knowing where they should go, where eyes should have been. The light caught two reflective pits, animal flat and empty. I crouched behind a crate, hand shaking so hard the beam jittered against the wall. Unit 84A was right there, small gray box, sealed perfect. Just a few steps past him. I should have turned and run. But the order said urgent. The system was watching. I spotted a small bolt on the floor near my boot, probably from one of the shelves. I picked it up and threw it across the aisle. It clanged off metal, loud enough to echo. Bill stopped chewing, his head turned toward the sound, slow at first, then snapping into alignment like someone adjusting a mannequin. He began to move. At first, the steps were dragging, awkward. Then they quickened, breaking into an unsteady run that didn't sound like footsteps at all. It was like a series of impacts, uneven but fast, closing the distance toward the echo I'd created. I used that heartbeat of distraction to grab the box, pressing it to my chest so tight the edges dug into my skin. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The sound of his movement was enough. Bones flexing, breath that wasn't quite breath. I bolted down the aisle, flashlight bouncing off crates and old pipes, each shadow twitching as I passed. When the stairs came into view, the air felt heavier, like the whole basement exhaled. I climbed 2 steps at a time. The door at the top yawned open, thank God, and I slammed it shut behind me so hard the hinges squealed. For a long minute, I just stood there, forehead against the cool metal, listening. No chasing, no sound, only the old hum of the warehouse returning to normal. Back in my room, I set the box on the counter. It was cold, even after the run. I didn't open it. I didn't want to know what made it urgent. I locked the door and sat with my back against it until my heartbeat slowed. Milo returned around dawn, his fur damp, smelling faintly of ozone and motor oil. He jumped onto the cot and stared at the box for a long time. Then he hissed, a low, quiet thing that didn't sound like him, and turned his back to it. That's when I checked the digital floor plan. Sub-level storage wasn't the only level. There were 4. Only one was marked with an access route. The rest were gray, blank squares beneath it. No entry, no data, no labels. But faint, almost hidden, were small icons that looked like stair symbols, leading deeper. I stared at them until the screen dimmed. Then I closed the laptop and told myself I'd never go back down. That was before the red door started to open. It began 2 nights later. Around 3:17 a.m., the time Bill always appeared. I was doing my rounds past Section D, the forgotten corner with the broken vending machines and crates no one logs anymore. The air there is different, thicker, quieter, like the warehouse is holding its breath. That's when I saw it. The red door. It had always been sealed, or so I thought. But now it stood open an inch, just enough for a red glow to leak through, a steady burning red, the color of oven coils or blood caught in glass. It wasn't flickering like light. It was breathing. Milo stepped ahead of me, shoulders low, tail stiff. He didn't growl this time. He just looked back, one eye glinting in the dim light, as if asking whether I was really that stupid. Maybe I was. I reached for the handle. The metal was warm. Too warm for a door that led to storage. I paused. Milo made a sound, a single low trill like a warning bell, and that was enough. I let go. I pulled the door shut. It clicked closed like it had been waiting for permission. The light vanished instantly. I stood there for a long moment, hands still hovering, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined it. The air still glowed red behind my eyelids. When I finally looked down, Milo was sitting by my boots, staring up at me. His whiskers twitched once, sharp like punctuation. Then he turned and started walking away, tail flicking back and forth. I followed. Since that night, the door's been different. Sometimes it's closed, sometimes it's cracked again. And almost always, when I pass through the corridor, Bill is standing in front of it. Same time, same place, same posture, unmoving. He never opens it. He just waits. I think he's guarding it, or maybe he's waiting for someone to feed what's inside. I don't know which is worse. The air around the red door had weight, like walking through invisible water. When you spend months inside the same structure, you learn its pulse, how sound and temperature change with the hour. But that corridor stayed wrong, like it didn't belong to the same warehouse. I started timing it. First night, 3:17 a.m., open an inch. Second night, sealed. Third night, open 2 inches. No noise, no footsteps, no mechanical cue, just that red breath glowing through the seam like the building had swallowed a furnace. Milo always noticed before I did. He'd stiffen on my shoulder, ears flattening as we approached Section D. I'd feel the low vibration of a growl start in his chest before I saw anything. The third night, he refused to come down from the mezzanine at all. That should have been my cue to quit. Instead, I brought a camera. It wasn't courage. I just wanted proof, something to hold between me and whatever this was. I set up the tripod 30 feet away and angled it toward the door, using the red glow as focus. I left it running on loop. At dawn, when the lights slanted through the warehouse windows, I returned for the footage. The camera was still there, but the battery, a full charge when I'd set it, was dead flat. No recording saved. Just a blank screen. And the tripod had been moved, rotated to face the opposite aisle, pointing at nothing. That was when I noticed the footprints. Not human. Four-toed, long, splayed, wide apart, each print pressed deep into the dust as if made by something heavy that had learned to walk carefully. They started at the red door and stopped at the camera. No return trail. When I replayed the image in my mind, I realized the tripod hadn't simply been rotated. It had been turned to face where I would be standing when I came back. By the 5th night, I'd started hearing it. Not the hum of machines, but something under it. A rhythm. Slow, patient, organic. It came when the lights flickered, the same intervals every time. 3 long pulses, 1 short, almost like a heartbeat muffled by concrete. Milo stopped eating. He crouched by the vent and stared toward the lower levels, tail twitching but never pouncing. The hair along his spine stayed raised even in sleep. I tried reporting the noises to maintenance. They filed the request, stamped resolved 15 minutes later, and sent an automated message. Environmental variance within operational limits. No further action required. That phrase sits in my inbox. Operational limits. The 6th night, I decided to stay in Section D until sunrise. If something was moving between those walls, I'd see it. I sat on a crate with a thermos of bitter coffee and watched the red door for hours. The hum cycled through its usual patterns, conveyors sleeping, fans sighing, but the deeper sound didn't start until my watch read 3:17 again. It began as vibration under my boots. Then a faint scrape, metal against metal, from behind the door. Milo wasn't with me. I'd locked him upstairs. I didn't want him near this. I pulled my flashlight, clicked it on, and the sound stopped. For a few seconds, the air went still. Then, from the other side of the door, something knocked. 3 times. Even. Patient. Not the random rattle of machinery. Not echo. Intentional. Every instinct in me screamed to run. But curiosity is a dangerous drug. It whispers that understanding will protect you. I raised my hand before I could think and knocked once back. The moment my knuckles touched metal, the world shifted. The hum cut out entirely. Every fluorescent light in the building flickered once and died. The darkness that followed wasn't empty. It pressed inward, full and breathing. My flashlight guttered, its beam thinning to a thread of pale gray that didn't reach the floor. Then the red light under the door flared bright, blinding. A voice, not sound but pressure, moved through me like air rushing through a tunnel. It didn't speak words, not exactly, but I felt meaning. A need. Feed. I staggered backward. My throat burned with a copper taste. Something slid through the gap at the bottom of the door, thin, glistening, the width of a finger, but ending in something that looked disturbingly like a mouth. Rows of small teeth clicked softly as it groped across the concrete. I ran. By the time I reached the elevator shaft, the lights returned, humming as if nothing had happened. When I looked back, the door was closed again. No glow, no sound, no proof. But the smear of wetness on the floor stretched 20 feet toward where I'd been standing. I didn't sleep that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing groping for me, tasting air that wasn't meant to breathe. I thought about quitting. I even packed a bag, my dad's old flannel, the note from my locker, Milo's food. But when I tried to check out through the main terminal, the system refused my credentials. My ID was under review. I was trapped in a job no one seemed to oversee. That's when I found the letter. It had been slid under my door while I was in the shower. Plain envelope, no name. Inside, a single typed sheet. If you've seen the door, it's seen you. Don't let it open all the way. If the cat leaves, follow him. He remembers the exits. No signature. I stared at the words until the edges blurred. The paper smelled faintly of machine oil and blood. That night, I kept every light in my unit on. Milo paced in circles, tail twitching. Around 3:17, the hum rose again, but this time it didn't come from the warehouse floor. It came from behind my wall. The first vibration made the mirror tremble. A soft hum, barely audible at first, like the start of a distant generator warming up. Then it deepened, pressing through the drywall and into my spine. I froze, toothbrush halfway to my mouth, foam sliding down the handle. For a second, I thought it was just the elevator motor. Our walls are thin and sound travels strange in a hollow building. But then Milo arched his back, tail puffed, and hissed at the mirror. Not the wall, the mirror. I stared at my own reflection, waiting for logic to return. The light flickered once overhead, and for a moment my reflection lagged, half a heartbeat late to move. When I raised my hand, it followed a fraction too slow. I stepped closer. The hum grew stronger. My reflection's eyes shimmered with faint red, like the door's glow echoing from somewhere deep behind the glass. Milo yowled, the kind of sound that shakes bone. Then, before I could react, he leapt up and slammed his body against the mirror. The glass spiderwebbed. The hum cut out instantly. I stood there, heart hammering, watching 1,000 fractured versions of myself stare back. Each tiny reflection held a red speck, like a dying ember. That was the first night I heard them whisper, not from the door, not from the vents, from inside the walls. It started as a rustle, like paper dragged across rough metal. Then it grew clearer. Breath against concrete, murmurs too fast to understand, but layered with rhythm, as if hundreds of voices tried to speak at once, and none quite found the same word. Milo crouched under the cot, eyes wide, ears flattening every time the whispering rose. I pressed my ear to the wall. Cold. And something else, like air moving through a throat too long and too narrow. When I backed away, I realized the hum wasn't in my ears anymore. It was in my chest. Each breath matched it. Each heartbeat echoed it. I spent the rest of that night pacing, too afraid to sleep, too exhausted to think. Every few minutes, the fluorescent light over my cot flickered red, then white, then red again. Each time, I half expected the door to be there, waiting, somewhere behind the plaster. By morning, a new message blinked on my work tablet. Mandatory check-in. Level B2. Failure to comply will result in administrative review. There was no signature, no timestamp, no way to respond. Just an address on the lower level, the one beneath sub-level storage. The floors no one was supposed to access. I looked at Milo. He just stared at me, tail flicking. I don't have a choice, I said. He didn't blink. I grabbed my flashlight, gloves, and the note. Don't feed it. Folded small in my breast pocket. The elevator didn't even ask for my key card this time. The panel lit up for B2 on its own. The car jerked once and started descending. The hum followed me all the way down. The doors opened to pitch darkness. My flashlight beam vanished into fog that looked too thick for air. A faint, wet smell hung there, metallic and sweet. I stepped out. The floor was damp beneath my boots, the concrete slick with condensation. The hum was louder now, steady, pulsing, alive. Rows of machinery stretched into the dark. Some of it looked ancient, bolted together from older systems. Cables as thick as my wrist ran along the ceiling, disappearing into the walls. Every few seconds, one of the cables twitched. The air moved with them. That's when I saw the glass tanks. Dozens of them, lined against the far wall. Each one filled with murky liquid, each containing shapes that floated too still to be mannequins. Human outlines, but not quite right. Limbs too long, spines bowed backward, faces missing features like clay wiped clean. Labels stenciled across the base: prototype, auto-retrieve unit, discontinued property of residential logistics systems. Each label stamped with a red symbol, a circle with 4 lines radiating inward like a mouth closing. The hum came from the tanks. No, from what was inside them. When I stepped closer, one of the shapes shifted, slow and deliberate, as if noticing the sound of my boots. Bubbles rose through the liquid. Then its head turned toward me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping on a hose that ran into the floor. The tank's glass vibrated with the hum, louder, heavier, until the whole room seemed to pulse in rhythm. Then a voice spoke over the intercom. Calm. Female. The same synthetic tone that read off brake reminders and safety tips. Night Operator Daniel, your compliance record is incomplete. Please resume feeding protocol. I froze. The voice repeated it, louder. Resume feeding protocol. A mechanical arm somewhere in the dark whirred to life. Metal scraped. A conveyor belt began to move. From the far end, a crate rolled toward me, dripping faint red across the floor. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what it would hold. The smell hit me first. Copper, oil, and something like wet hair. The voice continued. Consumption required to maintain system equilibrium. I turned and ran. The fog thickened as I sprinted through the aisles, flashlight jerking from tank to tank. Faces pressed against the glass now, some human, some not, all watching. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering under the hum. Feed it. Feed it. Feed it. I hit the elevator button so hard my fingers split. When the doors finally slid open, I dove inside and slammed my fist against close. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the doors slid shut, and something hit them from the other side, hard enough to bow the metal inward. The car jerked, lights flickering red, rising too slow, like something heavy clung to the roof. By the time it reached the main floor, I could taste blood. The doors opened. The hum stopped. Everything was silent again. I stumbled back to my unit, shaking. Milo was gone. His bowl overturned, paw prints leading toward the ventilation grate. On my cot lay a single note, typed in the same font as the last. If it starts humming from inside you, it's already too late. When I woke up, the lights were already on. I hadn't turned them on. The fluorescent tubes hissed faintly, casting an uneven pale wash across the room. My skin felt damp, like I'd been sweating for hours, and my tongue tasted of copper. The clock on the wall blinked 2:57 a.m., the same time it always freezes when power cuts, only there hadn't been one. I sat up, and for a few seconds everything seemed normal. The cot, the sink, the note pinned to the locker door that said, "Don't feed it." Then I felt it. The hum. Not around me this time. Inside. It wasn't pain exactly. It was rhythm. Slow, deep, mechanical. The sound of something adjusting to the shape of my lungs. I pressed a hand against my chest, half expecting to feel movement. My pulse didn't match the beat I heard. I whispered, "No, no, no, no." The air around the vent shivered. Milo's paw prints still led toward it, dry now. I crawled across the floor and put my ear to the grate. The sound there wasn't airflow. It was breathing. Long, shallow, hollow. Something on the other side exhaling in time with me. I backed away. My reflection in the small mirror above the sink looked the same at first glance, but the longer I stared, the less it did. My eyes were wrong again. Too bright, too steady. The reflection's chest rose a half second after mine. That's when the intercom clicked. A man's voice this time. Low, calm, deliberate. "Daniel," it said, "you're integrating beautifully." I froze. Who is this? No answer, just static. Then the voice returned, quieter, closer. You fed it. That's how it knows you. The hum inside me intensified, spreading through my ribs like heat through metal. I tried to breathe deep, but each inhale came with resistance, as if the air itself was thicker now. I didn't feed it, I whispered. I didn't. The voice laughed softly. Every system consumes, Daniel. You just gave it attention. That's all it needs. Static again, then silence. I gripped the edge of the sink and forced myself to focus on something real. The grit of metal, the sting of cold water when I splashed my face. The light above me flickered red for a heartbeat, then steadied. I stumbled out of the unit and down the stairwell toward the warehouse floor. I needed noise, motion, proof of the ordinary. But when I reached the bottom, the conveyors were still. Every machine was off, power dead except for the security lights glowing red above each aisle. The rule sheet from my locker flashed in my mind. If the red light above the freezer turns green, leave immediately. All of them were red. Every single one. I walked through the aisles calling for Milo. My voice echoed, flat and hollow. Each step echoed back twice, like someone walked beside me a beat late. A shape moved ahead, tall and crooked. Bill. He was standing at the far end of the aisle, half in shadow, half lit by the red emergency lights. His head tilted, watching me. I said nothing this time. I just kept walking, slow, controlled, until I saw what was behind him. The red door was open halfway. A wind spilled out, not air, but sound. The hum poured through the opening, deep and wet, shaking the metal racks. I could see it now. The source of that red light, a vast, breathing cavity of machinery and flesh, cables tangled through tissue, something pulsing far below. It wasn't one creature. It was many, fused together in motion. The tanks from level B2 were gone. This was what replaced them. And Bill was standing like a priest before it, arms open. When he spoke, his voice was a blend of a dozen tones, human and not. It's starving, he said. It remembers you. I took a step back. The floor under my boots was slick. I looked down, red smeared across the concrete, spreading outward from the open door. I'm not part of this, I said, my voice shaking. Bill's head turned too far, cracking at the neck joint. His mouth stretched until the skin split. You are this, he whispered. Behind him, something huge shifted in the glow. I saw outlines, arms, torsos, faces pressed into the walls, eyes blinking open one by one like awakening bulbs. They looked like the people who'd worked here before, the man who trained me, the missing employees. They were part of it now, woven into the machinery. The hum inside my chest responded to theirs, sinking for a heartbeat before I forced myself to step back. Milo's cry echoed from somewhere to my left. It wasn't fear. It was command. I turned and ran toward the sound. The floor trembled as something vast moved behind me. The racks collapsed like tin, steel shrieking. The hum chased me, pulsing in the walls, in my ribs, in the ground itself. Milo appeared at the base of the freight lift, fur bristled, eyes glowing a faint, impossible green. He darted inside and looked back, waiting. I followed him. I hit the emergency ascent. The gate slammed shut, gears catching, the lift jerking upward with a moan of metal fatigue. Below us, through the growing distance, the red light flared brighter, flooding the warehouse like sunrise. For a moment I thought I saw faces forming in it, faces that looked like mine. Milo hissed once, loud enough to cut through the hum. The lift shuddered and stopped halfway up the shaft. Everything went silent except for my heartbeat and his ragged breathing. Then the intercom crackled again. Open quote, system equilibrium restored, the voice said softly. Thank you for your contribution. Close quote. The lights went out. When I woke again, it was morning. I was lying on the floor of my unit, alone. The air smelled clean, almost new. My chest no longer vibrated. The clock read 8 a.m. sharp. My shift alarm was blinking. I stood up slowly. Everything looked normal, too normal. No broken mirror, no footprints, no red light. Even the note in my locker was gone. Only Milo remained, curled on the cot, asleep, breathing steady. I sat beside him and looked out the narrow window at the loading bay. A new truck had arrived, unloading boxes. Fresh workers in yellow vests moved between the pallets, faces blank, synchronized. When one of them turned toward the light, I saw it, just for a heartbeat, my own face, smiling, and somewhere below the hum began again, faint but certain, matching my breath.